also have 4 daughters, like William has. So 4 daughters and a wife. So I live with a bunch of women, so I feel right at home that way too. But I do appreciate you guys, girls, having me. And I would say y'all sing so pretty, and the dancing was awesome until a couple of guys tried to join in, and then it was not quite as awesome. But I don't know if you guys could see that. We were trying to dance too, but that's not that great, I don't think. But anyway, this little shoot here will remind me of not to keep y'all the whole day, but I did want to talk to you about the Woodlawn story and just some things that kind of learned through life, having witnessed all that. Has anyone in the room seen the Woodlawn? Okay. Okay, all right. So in the movie, I'm the little boy. You know, he's really adorable. Thought it was really good casting. Thought they did a good job. So I watched God do something incredible at Woodlawn, and kind of you all are probably learning some things. Who's learning some things? Okay, that's not right. Yeah, you guys can probably teach us a lot. But when you're young, you don't have much perspective. You don't have much context to see how profound certain things are. I mean, that's for good or bad. You all probably, at different times, you can say you didn't realize how profoundly bad a decision was at the time, or how profoundly amazing something was either. I mean, these things, it takes time for you to realize what a big deal that was. When you look back at it, is how you kind of recognize that. And I would say that that's true of me with Woodlawn. As a child, you know, I thought all coaches carried guns to school. You know, I thought that God came into a school and turned it upside down and everybody loved each other. And I didn't really realize that was what a miracle it was. Because it's the only thing I'd ever seen. It was the one life I'm living, and I saw that, and that's normal for me. And so I got older, and Dad got out of coaching for a little while. And then we moved to a different part of the state, and actually, I think William would probably agree with me on this, actually moved up to where William, somebody who works with some of your kitchen folks. Who knows William? Anybody besides the kitchen people? A lot of people? Yeah, y'all shouldn't get to know him. He's not good for you. So he's married to my little sister, so he's a good guy. Kind of try to keep him straight that way. But he also has 4 daughters, and he was like my best friend growing up. And then he started dating my sister, and at the time I was bigger than him. If he stands next to me now, he's a lot. But I was like, you just better treat her right, you know. He did. They've been married for 22 years now. But so he and I are best buddies, and he has 4 daughters, and I have 4 daughters, and they're the same age, basically, and then our wives. So when we go out, it's 10 girls and us. So we both, right now, this is like, hey, it's great. Anyway, I moved up to his town, and I wanted to specify that because I want to lump him in with the racists who were there. I'm just kidding. No, but I moved up to this town, and I was playing football, my dad was coaching, and it was different. It wasn't the same. When I left Woodlawn, every guy on that team, they all loved each other. There was no white or black. There was gold and green. I mean, that was their color. You know, they were Woodlawn. And really, as long as you wore gold and green, you were in. My only prejudices as a kid were like, if you weren't a good football player, I didn't like you that much. I mean, it was really kind of sad. I was such a football coach's son. You know, I was around the team all the time, and I was like, if you were a good football player, I loved you. I mean, it was totally conditional love on my part. And so, like, Tony Nathan was the star, and I just loved him. Thought he was the greatest thing ever. And he was an amazing athlete, but more than that, he actually knew Jesus, and he really was a sweet-hearted person. And so I was always with him. He just texted me the night before last just to see how my family was doing. He's the real deal. And you know, you meet people, sometimes this may have happened in your life. You meet people, or you think that somebody's some certain way, and then you meet them and you're let down. Like you just kind of like, oh, that wasn't what I thought. And I mean, that happens a lot, and we get disillusioned as people. I think sometimes like, dang. So when this whole movie thing came out, I figured I'd tell y'all the story, kind of how it all came together. I took Andy Irwin, one of the directors for the movie, down to Miami. I hadn't seen Tony Nathan in 35 years, probably. I know that shocked y'all because I look like I'm in my 20s, but I wasn't supposed to be funny. So anyway, took him down there, and I think I was a little bit nervous because I've had that same experience before where I met somebody. One of them was a Christian singer. I'm not going to say who it was. But they're not even alive anymore, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I mean, still don't want to trash him. But anyway, I met him, and I left and I was like, man, he's kind of a jerk, you know? And like, dang. So I was thinking when I meet Tony, I was just like telling my wife, I hope he's still the same Tony. And it really sounded like a 7-year-old boy again, I think. I mean, it was kind of like, we're going to see Tony. And so I get down there, and Tony, I see him walking up to the hotel where I'm meeting him, and he gets to me and gives me a big hug. Hadn't seen me in 35 years. I'm 47 years old. He's 57 years old. And he said, I love you, man. And what is this thing we're doing, you know? And then we sat down and talked for 2 hours about everything, and he left, and I got on the phone with my wife, and I was like, he's just the same, he's just as crazy as me. But I'll tell you, that's evidence that he is a man who's been walking with God for a long time, and he has a sweet spirit in him, and that's the story of Woodlawn, and I wanted to tell y'all just a little bit about kind of what happened at Woodlawn, and how the movie came about, and then a few principles that you can apply in your own life. And really, you know, the story of God's redemption, it takes on different forms, but there are certain key elements to it that are consistent across everybody's lives. We're all broken. And how many of y'all have learned how broken we've been? Yeah, me too. We're all broken. It's a broken world, and we need a Savior. And He is seeking us out. And when He comes after you, sometimes you may have your ears clogged, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But He's overwhelming. When you see the love of Christ, and it's real, it gets you. And that's what happened at Woodlawn. So, Dad began coaching when he was 22 years old. He graduated from Woodlawn High School in 1960. He came back in 1964 and started coaching. And that was at Woodlawn. It was his dream job. He just wanted to coach there. So at age 29, he became the head coach. That was 1971. It coincided with when the federal government decided that they were going to force integration of the schools, the public schools. At that time, Birmingham had 5 white high schools and had 4 black high schools. The white high schools were kind of divided geographically, as were the black high schools. Woodlawn and Banks were the easternmost white high schools. Hayes High School was the easternmost black high school. And so what the government decided to do was they were going to take 500 kids out of Woodlawn, send them out into a few different schools, and then they were going to take 500 kids from Hayes High School and bus them in to Woodlawn High School. Now, you know, I think that there's some people like look at the South and think everybody hated everybody, which is really not true. And it doesn't require everyone hating everyone for there to be chaos. I mean, you can have 10% here and 10% here, and it can be pretty bad if those are allowed 10%, or a really angry 10%. If you think about it, the kids at Woodlawn were were still getting to stay with all their friends and everything else, and there was some racism there. Kids from Hayes were leaving everything they knew, all their friends. They were going to this one school, but now they're in here with a bunch of people, and there's fear and anger about being stuck in some place, and it was chaos. So Dad's first year as head coach, he's 29 years old, and he's got chaos all over the place. And Dad actually didn't have, I'd say he didn't have a racist bone in his body. He just didn't care that much about people as individuals at all. He just wanted to win. He had that drive. You know, probably known some coaches like that before that just gonna win. Well, that's kind of how he was. And he would tell you that before Christ, he didn't really know how to love people. He just worked, and he wanted to win. So his first couple of years at Woodlawn, things had a really average couple of seasons. And so he decided, you know, we need some unity here. Still not a Christian, but was just thinking, you know, if we get people together and we make them work toward a common goal, maybe we can gain some unity. So he said, we're going to have football camp. And that's a glorified term for y'all are all going to sleep in the gym. That was really what football camp meant. So they were going to sleep in the gym. They were going to practice, eat, sleep on cots in the gym. But all the kids were going to be together. About that time, a guy came by his office and said, hey, Coach, I'd like to talk to your boys. And my dad's like, what do you want to talk to my boys about? And this guy's name is Wells Goebel. Anybody know who Wells Goebel is? He's about like this tall. And he started the Save a Life ministry and Lifeline ministry. He's been around forever. He's probably close to 80 years old now. But at that time, he was kind of like the Billy Graham of high schools. I feel like I need to walk over here some because y'all are getting neglected, so I'll come on this side for a second. I'll come. I feel home over. This is where I feel. But anyway, so Wells was like the Billy Graham of high schools. He literally went around to high schools and he would just go in and say, hey, can I talk to your kids? And his message was the gospel. He just went in and spoke truth. And my dad said, what do you want to talk to my kids about? He said, I want to talk to them about Jesus. And my dad was kind of like, I'm not so sure about that. Dad had this idea that if his football team knew Jesus, then they'd be soft. They'd be weak. And he realized later in life how wrong he was. He realized pretty quickly how wrong he was. But he said no. And Wells kind of challenged him. Dad said, okay, I'll give you 15 minutes after dinner tonight. And so Wells Goebel came and he spoke to his team. At that time, Dad's football team was 44 players. There were 4 Christians on the team. 4 guys were believers. And Wells presented the gospel, the truth of the love of Christ. In the middle of this really, I say the football team, it wasn't like they were fighting all the time. They just were in cliques, you know? And Wells spoke, and the other 40 kids came forward. So now his entire football team has converted to Christ. All of them are Christians, but not my dad. And this is what I was talking about before. Sometimes, who knows the story of Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane, what he did to the high priest's servant? Does anyone know? There's a book in it for you. I have 3 freebies. Somebody raise their hand. There we go. Yeah, he cut his ear off. Now, Peter was a fisherman. And so if you think about this, do you think Peter was aiming for the ear? I think Peter was probably trying to get that noggin. He was going to cut the head off. He was going after trying to kill him. He went like, I think he's going after Jesus. I think I'll just take the ear. And he probably just no skill with a knife and got the ear. Well, you think about that and you think Jesus healed that guy. But do you think that in the moments just following that, or even a week later, if Peter was to approach that guy, I'm going to get electrocuted up here. If Peter was to approach that guy and say, hey, let me tell you about the love of Jesus. How quickly do you think that guy would sit down and have a conversation with Peter? First of all, he might, without Jesus, he wouldn't even have ears, so it'd be really hard for him to hear. But he's not going to want to sit down and talk to him because he cut his ear off. And I think that happens oftentimes. Well-meaning Christians, you all may have had an experience with this, particularly when you're going through a hard time. Well-meaning people will say things that are really, really hurtful. And you really, at that point, don't want to hear anything from them anymore. You just, you know what? That's good for you, and I'm going to move on. And you can think about people in your life who are just like that, and it causes them, and it may have been you at one point. It may still be in some of your life. Just kind of hold that right out here. That's your faith. That's good. But I've been hurt, and I just can't hear anymore. There are a lot of people like that. They've had their ears cut off. Or, maybe not as violently like as that, but maybe it's just someone who's a hypocrite. They've talked the talk, never walked the walk, and you just don't want to hear anything else from them. It's kind of like, I want to see some truth, because I ain't hearing it from you. I won't hear it from you. And I think that illustration with Peter is a good one, because I'm not going to listen to a guy who just cut my ear off, even if he had a lot of truth to share with me. And I think there's a lot of people in the world like that, who've been hurt, or they've just seen too many lies, and they're just not going to hear it. But the love of Jesus is overwhelming, and when you see it, you recognize it. And my dad was sitting back, and he heard, or he was in the same room. The gospel is the power of God for salvation. Romans 1:16 says that the gospel is the power of God for salvation. And when we hear it, people respond to it. Obviously, on my dad's football team, 40 players, the entire team came to Christ. Dad was in the same room, couldn't hear it. And I think he was one of those people probably was holding it out here, just I've seen too much, I've heard too much, I'm not gonna hear it. So, I think he thought this was an emotional experience, that this will probably wear off. They're not going to really, really work these kids really hard. They're going to start pointing fingers at each other again and blaming, and this will wash away, and we'll get right back to where we were. But just the opposite happened. These guys started getting closer and closer and closer. And Dad's seeing something really bizarre take place. Peculiar. So the team pretty much knew Dad's the only guy that's not a Christian now on the team. The other assistant coaches had come to Christ, and there's my hard-headed, hard-hearted dad keeping it out here. But he's being worked on. God's pursuing him, Jesus is after him. And the player said, let's have an FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes meeting over at such and such's house. Well, such and such was a guy named Howard Miller. He was a sophomore on the team. His family lived in a kind of upper middle class area that was all white at the time. And Dad was thinking, the black kids may not feel comfortable going over there. It's all white neighborhood. And even if they go, what if the family decides not to let them in? I mean, how bad could this be for my team? And he was concerned, but he decided to go. And when we got over there, he saw all these guys all together, black and white, house is full, their families welcoming. People got their arms around each other, they're praying together, they're laughing, they're cutting up. And Dad realized, I don't have what they have. I don't have that, and I want it. And he slipped out the back and left. Started driving home and started praying, really just talking to God through his windshield, saying, I don't even know if you're there, but I think you are, because I've seen something amazing. Jesus said in John 13:34, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And by this, the world will know that you are my disciples by the love you have one for another. Jesus is saying, if the world wants proof, you're my proof. The love you have one for another, that proves it to people. And man, had that ever just been lived out in front of my dad. He had been basically loved into the kingdom. He had heard the gospel, but not really. But he saw the gospel. He saw the love of God lived out in these guys, and it drew him in. And he said, I want what those guys got. And he prayed all the way home, got to our house at 1139 Wanda Lane, got on his knees, and he met Jesus that night. Amen. And he was never the same. Never the same. He coached differently. He loved those guys. Guys who played for him from then on would tell you they played really, really hard for him because they knew he loved them. It wasn't about him using them to win. William played for him. He didn't play that hard for him, but William was actually like an all-state player for that. He was really, really good. And he played his heart out. He even played with a concussion. It's kind of funny. You shouldn't laugh at it, but like he didn't know where he was for like a full day of practice, and we just like would say ask him questions just to be mean. But anyway, maybe I wasn't really walking with Jesus at that point. Anyway, so that's that story, and what God did through this school and through this football team. It really spread across the city of Birmingham. But there's a few things in that I think are really, really important. One, that family, and it was Crestwood, is where they were having this FCA meeting. The family, the Millers, 3 families had said no. They wouldn't have the meeting at their house. And so the Millers, knowing this, still said yes. Small obedience. But you know, they if 3 people said no, that means that there was some social pressure, like, about doing this. Now, I might say no because I didn't want to have 44 high school kids in my house, particularly my 4 daughters. But anyway, I'm not a whole football team in the house with them necessarily. But really, just from a social standpoint, they said, you know what? I'm going to obey God instead of what my neighbors think, and I'm going to do this. Small obedience. Luke 16:10 says, he who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. And what this story kind of taught me, this is one of the principles I think that just know this to be true. God does the extraordinary through the ordinary. Amen. Part of that, though, is because there is no ordinary with God. Psalm 139:14, who knows what that says? It's a book in it. Somebody ought to be looking it up quick. I mean, these books, they're so valuable. I'm just kidding. Psalm 139:14. I really do want to give somebody a chance to get a book here. So one more time.
I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
That's exactly right. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. See, that's not ordinary. Fearful and wonderful. It's not ordinary. God has made all of us wonderfully. You know, there's times in my life that I'm sure my children and my wife don't think I'm that wonderful. But God has made all of us extraordinary. And He can, with obedience, He can do the extraordinary with little obedience. Saying, yes, I'll have these people in my house. My dad literally came to Christ because of small obedience. And look at the ripple effect of that. I mean, who knew because this family said, yeah, they can come to our house. It's a book and a movie. It just opened in Canada yesterday, and it's opening around the world. And people are hearing the story. And yeah, we hear about the superstar, Tony Nathan. And I've already told y'all, he's a superstar. He's a superstar person. He was a superstar athlete. That team, and that story, according to the experts or people looking from the outside, it was a bunch of, quote, ordinary people. He was the only star. Dad was yes, ma'am.
remember when I was little, my dad didn't go to Woodlawn.
Right.
But I remember him and his two best friends taking me to Leesville to see Woodlawn play fight. And all I remember him saying in the car was, "We've got to go see Tony Dutton play.
That's right.
The boy is amazing. We've got to go see this boy play ball against me."
That's right.
You know, and at the time, I mean, I was a child, so I'm like, what is this all about? I didn't understand. But now, I understand.
Absolutely. And he was a superstar. He was unbelievable. Everybody wanted to see him. The rest of the team, Wells Goble, just a regular guy, just a guy going knocking on doors. My dad, at that point, Dad became a famous coach, but he wasn't at that time. He just started. I think when he struck by lightning or something. Maybe it's the Christmas tree. So, they all say, right? Yeah. So Dad's an ordinary guy. A bunch of ordinary guys. God says you're not ordinary. God says you're extraordinary. He's going to do the extraordinary through you. And he does that. The secret ingredient. What did Jesus say the world will know that you're my disciples? What was it? How will the world know that you're love? The love you have one for another. It's overwhelming. That's the magic ingredient. Obedience and love. God does the extraordinary. Let me see where I am on my notes so I don't just keep on talking all day because I kind of want to. So, the last thing is, and you guys experience this probably better than a lot of folks just because y'all have this body together and you share some experiences. I'll tell you, give you a little dirt on me so y'all can go say, that guy's totally screwed up. And he got electrocuted by a microphone, so he's really good. I am, as a young man, was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Anybody deal with depression? Okay, that's okay. So yes, in the middle of that, I used to think, where is God? Where is God? And you've probably had things in your life where you thought, I feel like I'm so alone. Where is God? Well, in the middle of my pain, I would wonder, where is he? And people would come around me from the church, people who love Jesus and love me. They would put their arm around me and they'd say, I'm praying for you. Hey, you want to do something? You want to get together? You want to just hang out? Or they'd just be there. Sometimes just having somebody around was enough. And I would think, man, that's really, really nice. And then I'd be like, God, why aren't you loving me? And one day in the middle of that, he said, that's me. That's my body. That the body of Christ. So much of the time we want the chill bump moments, we want to be zapped, but not like the microphone. We want there to be some lightning or fireworks or something like that, and Jesus is saying, I'm loving you right now with my body. See, there's a reason that he calls us the body of Christ. How does a person receive a hug? The body. Bodies hug, bodies kiss, bodies feed from the kitchen, bodies use their hands to do things. Bodies are how God generally manifests his physical love for you. So in the middle of darkness, in the middle of rough times, in the middle of good times, because I think that we wonder where God is in the bad times oftentimes, but we also forget he's there in the middle of the good times. And so understand that he's loving you with the body. When you're wondering, why don't I feel loved? Recognize all these girls around you who love you, and the staff who loves you, and those people that God places in your life. He's whispering, that's me. I love you. That's my body. And you all have such a remarkable testimony to be able to go out to other people who are hurting. And when we think about the extraordinary, it's not always a book or a movie. Matter of fact, it's usually not. But what you do with the least of these You know, I talk to schools a lot, and to talk to girls can be so mean. Y'all know that. To talk to a group of girls and say, you know, that one girl who sits at the table by herself every day, go sit by her. This is a small obedience, but it could be the beginning of the extraordinary, the ripple that occurs in that little girl's life going forward. It doesn't take what seems like a miracle for God to do the miraculous. He does the extraordinary through the ordinary. And so I want to encourage you all, and I'm tied up. I want to encourage you all. You aren't ordinary. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. God is going to use you through small obedience. You don't go put on a nun hat. Or just through living life and small obediences, God is going to work the extraordinary through you. And to remember that the body of Christ is the best evidence for the world around us to see that Jesus is real. That's how my dad came to Christ. He saw it lived out in people. And y'all have an amazing opportunity to share that and embrace your trip. Embrace the stuff you've been through, because it magnifies the love that you've got in Him. And He really is. He's all we need. That song, I tried to Shazam it on my phone, because it's an amazing song, and one I needed to hear this morning. So with that, I want to thank y'all. I'm going to hang out and talk and answer questions. Matter of fact, if y'all want, if you have questions about the movie or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer some on the mic, but I'd also love to hang out and meet some of you guys and talk. So thank y'all very much.
Couple things. Todd has 3 books, right? So the one